The first thing that we need to do is to pre-stretch the spring. We do that by stretching it to 15 inches, at which point you can feel it starting to give. When we release the stretching force, we will see that the spring has permanently stretched and is now about 2 inches long, and the coils are no longer touching. The next thing to do is to cut a piece of card from our packaging. And then we can transfer the drawing that's in the lab manual onto that piece of card. The first thing I'm going to do is to draw a straight line to act as a reference. Then I'm going to mark a line that is parallel to the reference, but is at a distance of 5 centimeters. And I do that by using my rule to mark 2 points that are 5 centimeters away from the first reference line. And then I'm going to join those 2 points that I've marked. Next, I'm going to mark a center line that will help me align all the components. Next, I'm going to cut out the strip that I've just marked. So I end up with a strip of card that is 5 centimeters wide. Next, I'm going to use a piece of paper as a square. So I'm lining up one edge with the length of the strip, and then the other edge will mark a perpendicular to that length. So I'm going to use as a reference line that I can measure from. So I'm going to cut across the line that I've just marked. And then I'm going to measure the 2 centimeter wide flap that is at the bottom of the spring scale. Once again, I do that by marking 2 points that are 2 centimeters away from a reference line, and then joining those 2 points together. Next, I'm going to mark a line parallel to the second line that is at a distance of 15 centimeters. I'd forgotten to mark a second point, so I went back and did that. I then cut off the excess. Then I started marking the construction lines for the little rectangular hole that I'm going to put at the top of the card. Because these lines were so close to each other, I was able to just eyeball the line and make them parallel. I'm now marking the width of the windows that I need to cut out of the card. Once again, I'm just eyeballing it to draw my parallel line. Finally, I'm going to mark the other edge of the larger window. And I'm hatching out the areas that I need to cut out. First, I'm going to use a blunt pencil just to score along the lines along which I need to fold. So I'm just putting a little fold on those lines. I hadn't quite scored that deep enough. We don't want to score it too deep and weaken the card. Using another piece of card as scrap, I'm going to use my craft knife to cut out the windows. Of course, be very careful when you do this. And there we have it. We've finished the scale card. The next step now is to find a brightly colored piece of card that we can use to make the indicator. So I'll make my indicator about 5 millimeters in wide and about 3 centimeters long. And cut a point. It's probably best to cut a point at both ends. I realized that later. Push the indicator card in between the two coils that form the hoop at the end of the spring, and then there should be just enough gap at the end to thread the string loop back to where it was. I hadn't quite made the gap large enough, so I was having difficulty. I'd recommend that you make the indicator a little bit narrower if you're having this problem. Okay, third time's a charm, and I think I was able to get the thread through the hoop there, the loop. And then using a lanyard hitch, I tied the string to the end of the spring and passed the other end of the spring through the larger hole at the end of the card. By this point I had already attached the string at the other end of the spring. There are more details on how to attach that in the lab manual. Just check that the spring moves freely and the indicator doesn't drag too much, but is reasonably close enough to the card to enable an accurate alignment. Because of the natural twist in the spring, I didn't have that situation, and so I decided to cut a point at the other end. I tried just bending it to see if that would help, but that didn't work, and so I had to push it through and cut a point at the other end. So there will be some adjustment required to the indicator to make sure that it operates correctly. As you can see, I still wasn't happy with the position of the indicator, so I pushed it through. Straightened it up, and then cut a point on the other end of it. Now I was happy with the operation of the spring scale. The next thing to do was to use some hot glue to secure the thread and the indicator. So put a couple of spots on the indicator to prevent it from slipping. Of course, we don't want to glue the indicator to the backing material, just cleaning up some threads of the glue that might interfere with the operation. So just let the glue set. Next thing to do is to open up a paper clip to make a hook. and then squeeze one end of it so it is locked on to the bottom end of the spring scale. Next, we're going to tie a piece of string around the neck of a water bottle so that it will not slip off, and we can use it as a variable weight by filling it with different amounts of water. So I'm just tying a simple overhand knot, I believe it's called. And then just tying those two free ends of string together to make a loop. Let's pull in that tight. There we go. Just check it's secure. Make sure your bottle has a top so that if it does fall, the water won't spill. First thing that we're going to do with our constructor spring scale is to measure or draw the 0 point. So just hang it from say a door handle, just let it hang freely, and then carefully mark the 0 point where the position of the indicator, basically with no load on it. To make the measurements of the spring extension with different loads, we're going to zero our scale and then put the bottle with the cap on and then fill it to the required weight. For the first measurement, we want to fill it to 51 grams total mass, and that is equivalent to a weight of 0.5 newtons. Once we've done that, put the cap on the bottle, and then we can hang that on the spring scale. I'm about to do that now. There we go. And then, of course, once it has settled and is not oscillating, basically jumping up and down, I gently use a felt marker to mark the position of the indicator as precisely as I could. Then I would repeat this process but using different amounts of water in the bottle.